Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Well, welcome to the Wednesday night class, everyone, and namaste. We are studying Swami Vivekananda, his Jnana Yoga, a series of talks delivered in England and in the United States, gathered together and published by the Ramakrishna Order as Jnana Yoga. This particular talk is titled The Atman, Bondage and Freedom. So before we begin, is there anything that anyone would like to say from their own wisdom or experience, or from their concern about what we've been studying, or any question that anyone would like to ask? We always need to get anything resolved before we go ahead so that there's a firm foundation on which to build. All right. The Swami has been talking about how nothing in manifestation ever truly leaves manifestation. It simply changes form. It will take a certain form and therefore a name, and we have names for these forms. And after a time, it will dissolve into its elements and take some new form. Swami Vivekananda calls this the Law of Reincarnation. And so we'll start with this. The jiva, the soul, comes to higher or lower states. This is the well-known law of reincarnation, and this law binds all creation. That's what I just summarized. So I'll repeat that. The jiva, the soul, comes to higher or lower states. This is the well-known law of reincarnation, and this law binds all creation. People in this country think it is too horrible that man should come up from an animal. Why? What will be the end of these millions of animals? Are they nothing? If we have a soul, so have they. And if they have none, neither have we. It is absurd to say that man alone has a soul and the animals none. I have seen men worse than animals. I have seen men worse than animals. I think we can all echo that sentiment. The human soul has sojourned in lower and higher forms. Now, the soul is something separate from the form. That's what he means by it has sojourned. It has traveled from form to form, like a garment that you wear, and when you're finished with the garment, you take off the garment and you put on a new one. This is how Sri Krishna describes it in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. The human soul has sojourned in lower and higher forms, migrating from one to another according to the samskaras or impressions. But it is only in the highest form, as man that it attains to freedom. Now, this is a very important point. And again, I'd like to ask if there is anything to contribute from your own wisdom or experience, or any concern that you have, or any question you'd like to ask about this business, that it is only in the form of human beings that the soul, the Atman that has been in bondage, attains to freedom. Anything at all from anyone about that concept, because it's once again, the spiritual aspirant has to hold two thoughts firmly in grasp. The thoughts about how it currently, that spiritual aspirant currently thinks, therefore speaks and acts, and these higher ideas that the Swami is introducing us to. So is there anything at all about that needs any comment or question? Very well.
Can I ask something real quick about the statement?
Yes, Roberto, please.
I guess it's a little difficult for me to believe his claim that human is the highest form, since he himself was a human, I guess. Isn't there a bit of bias in assuming that we are the highest form, or how can we confirm that we are in fact the highest form?
The scriptures say it is so. The scriptures of Sanatana Dharma, which is the proper name for Hinduism. The scriptures say it is so, and the way to confirm it is through your own experience. Now, the great saints have always had very fine and loving relationships with other forms. For example, there's a lovely poem by St. Francis about a conversation he had with a squirrel. And there's a wonderful poem by Meister Eckhart about a conversation he had with an ant, A-N-T, ant. So it isn't as if these other forms are not consciousness itself in that form. But the Swami will go on to explain why it is only in the human form that we have this capacity to attain freedom. And that is because we have the capacity for reflection, self-reflection. It is said even the angels do not have this capacity. This capacity for self-reflection was mirrored in that statement that I made earlier, that the spiritual aspirant, one of the characteristics of the spiritual aspirant is the ability to hold their current way of thinking, therefore speaking and acting, in mind, and reflect on that, and these higher ideas that were given through the scriptures and the teachers, and reflect on those, and migrate from the one way of thinking, speaking, and acting to the higher way of speaking, thinking, and acting. It is said that human beings are the only form of consciousness that has that capacity. The Swami will go on to explain, but I'm really glad you asked that question, because that is the seminal idea here, that it is in this form that we have the capacity to free ourselves from the bondage of manifestation. Thank you, Roberto. Anything else from anyone before we go on?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I don't remember if it was in a Tuesday class reading or one of Sarvapriyananda's lectures. I heard that somebody asked Holy Mother if, because there is a belief that if you die in Banaras, then you are liberated.
Yes.
And then she said yes, and yes. Then this person asked her, even the ant? And she said, yes, even the ant.
Yes.
But he did have a caveat. He said, Swami, that you ought to have done enough karma to be able to do that, because a lot of people go to Benares to die, but they don't. And he gave one example of this rich person who lived in Benares for many, many years and went to Lucknow for something and died there.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yes, there are the samskaras or mental impressions that govern our thinking, speaking, and acting because of the influence of the gunas on those samskaras. Why, lo and behold, he'd lived in Benares all those years with the intention of dying there, but something about his samskaras, his karma, took him to Lucknow, and there he died. So Sri Ramakrishna had the vision of this actually happening when he was in Benares, Varanasi. He actually had the vision of people on the funeral pyre, Mother untying the knots of their heart, that is to say, that which keeps us in bondage, and Shiva whispering in the Jiva's ear the mantra of liberation. So that must have been Sarvapriyananda, because I don't remember it being from one of our Tuesday classes, but that's a wonderful story. Thanks for bringing that out, Swayam. Anything else from anyone? All right. The man form, back to the Swami, the man form is higher than even the angel form. And of all forms, it is the highest. Man is the highest being in creation because he attains to freedom. All this universe was in Brahman, and it was, as it were, projected out of him and has been moving on to go back to the source from which it was projected, like the electricity which comes out of the dynamo, completes the circuit, and returns to it. Now, this is called the day of Brahma. According to both the Vedas and the astrophysicists, it lasts approximately 110 billion years. Of that, since this manifestation, this cycle of manifestation began, and it began according to the Chandogya Upanishad with Brahman, or the cosmic mind, saying to itself, I am one, I shall become many. And so whether you regard this as a dream or whether you regard this as a relative reality, as Adi Shankaracharya speaks of it, nevertheless, that's when it began. But it began, according to the astrophysicists, about 13.7 billion years ago. So we're not very far into the day of Brahma. But it doesn't mean that each of us who came into manifestation at time zero, as it were, because the seed for us, as the Swami describes in detail in the earlier lectures in Jnana Yoga, everything that we are and are to become was in the seed of us, seed of each of us, that was projected or manifested at time zero. So in this form, having attained this form after who knows how many of those billions of years, we are now eligible, so to speak, to no longer remain as part of that manifestation. As a short poem says, being, creating, doing, sharing. The joys of these is why we're here. When you're truly tired of this, just sign off and head for home. Now, this is what sets human beings apart from the rest of all manifested consciousness, that we can turn away from the manifestation. And as the little poem says, sign off and head for home. That is to say, that the source that the Swami is just now talking about. We can become like the electricity which comes out of the dynamo, completes the circuit, and returns to the dynamo. Now, all of creation will ultimately do this, as the Swami explains. The gunas, having come into disequilibrium by the very thought of the cosmic mind, I am one, I shall become many, that thought through the gunas, which had been in perfect equilibrium during the night of Brahma, through those gunas into disequilibrium. And according to Vedanta, what happens is immediately arises Maya, which is always potential. Now, first, Maya is subtle, not in any way that we would recognize, except in the deepest meditation, as manifest. And so Maya, manifesting as this subtle form of the gunas, begins to interact in ever more complicated anti-entropic ways within something called Hiranyagarbha, which is the cosmic egg. This is the Vedanta conception. There are other conceptions. But the Vedanta conception to which the Swami adheres, Swami Vivekananda, this interaction of the three gunas becomes so intense and so complex, the vibration becomes so intense that Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic egg, can no longer contain it. And so it bursts forth. Now, though the parallels are not exact, it sounds an awful lot like the Big Bang. And so we have Brahman alone, then we have Brahman with Maya, then we have Brahman with Maya, which has projected Hiranyagarbha, and then Hiranyagarbha bursts, and we have Jagat, which is all of manifestation, which goes on expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding until, as the astrophysicists put it, it reaches the state of absolute zero, because everything is too far apart to interact with anything else, and therefore no vibration, therefore now the gunas are back in equilibrium. So that's the cycle as it is described. We are in that cycle, 13.7 billion, according to the astrophysicists, 13.7 billion years into an approximately 110 billion year manifestation. This number was derived from the value of the Higgs boson. You can look that up if you like. There was uncertainty about this until, and only the theoretical physicists had any estimate of it until the value of the Higgs boson was derived, discovered, if you will. And from that, it looks like the period of anti-entropy or increasing complexity and specialization goes on for approximately 55 billion years. And then, though entropy is there along with anti-entropy always, anti-entropy predominates for 55 billion years. And then there's a transition and entropy becomes predominant at the point when the universe is that age and things begin to be too far apart to interact in the way they had to create more complexity and specialization. And so ultimately, we end up at this absolute zero state. That was quite a little ramble. Anything to say about it or ask about it? Okay, that's the circuit that the Swami is describing when he says, the universe, all this universe was in Brahman, and it was, as it were, projected out of him, Maya, Hiranyagarbha Jagat, and has been moving on to go back to the source from which it was projected, like the electricity which comes out of the dynamo, completes the circuit, and returns to it. The same is the case with the soul. Projected from Brahman, it passed through all sorts of, and he starts with vegetable, but if you look in the early talks of Jnana Yoga, he starts with even earlier forms. It was projected from Brahman. It passed through all sorts of vegetable and animal forms, and at last is in man. And man is the nearest approach to Brahman. To go back to Brahman, from which we have been projected, is the great struggle of life. When we decide to sign off and head for home, that's when that struggle begins. When we say, I've had enough of manifestation. So to go back to Brahman, from which we have been projected, is the great struggle of life. Whether people know it or not does not matter. In the universe, whatever we see of motion, of struggles in minerals or plants or animals is an effort to come back to the center and be at rest. In other words, the three gunas are in perfect equilibrium. Come back to the center and be at rest. There was an equilibrium, and that has been destroyed. And all parts and atoms and molecules are struggling to find their most equilibrium. They're lost, All that was destroyed, and every part and every atom and molecule is struggling to find its lost equilibrium again. In this struggle, they are combining and reforming. In other words, they take one form, they lose that form, they take another form. This is reincarnation. So in this struggle, they are combining and reforming, giving rise to all the wonderful phenomena of nature, all struggles and competitions in animal life, plant life, and everywhere else. All social struggles and wars are but expressions of that eternal struggle to get back to that equilibrium. Now, since this idea of lost equilibrium and the struggle to regain equilibrium is this central idea of bondage and freedom, any thoughts from anyone, from your own wisdom or experience, a concern or a question, anything you'd like to say or ask? Very well. Everyone's content with that. That's great. The going from birth to death, the traveling, is what is called samsara in Sanskrit. This going from birth to death, this traveling, is what is called samsara in Sanskrit. The round of birth and death, literally. That's what it means. Samsara means that literally. All creation, passing through this round, will sooner or later become free. All creation, passing through this round, will sooner or later become free. In other words, that state of absolute zero or perfect equilibrium will be regained. The question may be raised that if we all shall come to freedom, why should we struggle to attain it? If every one of us is going to be free, we will sit down and wait. It is true that every being will become free sooner or later. No one can be lost. Nothing can come to, and I'm going to add the word utter destruction. Nothing can come to utter destruction. Everything must come up. If that is so, what is the use of our struggling? In the first place, the struggle is the only means that will bring us to the center. And in the second place, we do not know why we struggle. We have to. That's why I said when that little poem was recited, and when you're truly tired of this, just sign off and head for home. The concept is there that this turning away from creation, manifestation, and heading for home is not necessarily entirely volitional. So that's what this Swami means in the second place. We do not know why we struggle. We have to. And the way it arises in us is it starts as an itch. I know there's more to this than I'm experiencing in day-to-day worldly life. I know this because of certain things I've experienced, inklings I've had, transcendent experiences, whatever you want to call it. So it starts as an itch, and so that stimulates curiosity. And you then begin to seek, what is it that is beyond this? There's all these spiritual traditions and so on. What's the meaning of all this? Well, once one discovers that there are established paths and that there are teachers in books, in spirit form, in physical form, who will give us guidance to rediscover what it is that's causing this itch. I say rediscover because obviously if it was ever known, if it's now unknown, it must have been known at one time, and that knowledge was lost, which is what the story of Genesis is all about, of course. The fall. So when we enter duality, we lose the knowledge of our true nature. And when we begin to discover that something is there and other people have discovered it, and they say we can discover it too, recover it too, then that itch becomes an ache. And ultimately it becomes an unbearable ache. And the sense from here is the reason you're here with us on this Wednesday night is that you are feeling that ache. And you're looking for what will give you some relief from that ache. And of course, the relief from that ache is the freedom that is the freedom and bliss, true happiness, that is said to be our very nature. Brahman or Satchidananda. So anything at all regarding any of that you'd like to add to from your own wisdom or experience, or ask a question or express a concern?
So, Brother Shankara?
Yes.
This is Dennis.
Yes, Dennis.
On previous evenings, we've talked about the balance of good and evil, that there seems to be kind of a balance there. And go back to that sentence that no one can be lost. It kind of seems like, and we've also talked about this evening of equilibrium. How do I resolve that no one can be lost, but yet there's that balance of good and evil, and finding that equilibrium?
The balance of good and evil exists within manifestation. That which is clothed by manifestation is beyond good and evil, beyond the gunas. So it's never, the good and evil is strictly within manifestation. There is no such thing as good and evil in the realm beyond manifestation. But that's only to be known by experience, and no one can tell you, you must believe this. It's not dogma. As Vivekananda said, each soul is potentially divine. That is to say, the divinity is within it like there's electricity in a battery. But until you know what a battery is, you have no idea there's electricity in it. Well, each soul is potentially divine. The goal of human life is to manifest that divinity. And then he says, here are some ways to do it. So we have this potential being, this, not that it's maybe there or not. No, it's there, just like the electricity's in the battery. But until we learn how to manifest it, which comes through meditation. Our first real knowledge comes of it when we learn to watch existence as the witness rather than react to it habitually or automatically. In other words, when we escape the effects of the left limbic system and the left cerebral cortex. Their job is to keep us safe and secure and keep on procreating and eating and so on. They'll keep doing that as long as we allow it to be automatic or habitual. As soon as we begin through introspection, through turning within, to see there is this other awareness within us called the witness. It is the face. It is the what we can first know of the Atman, the witness consciousness. It simply watches and experiences. It does not participate. And then we see that everything is happening in the presence of that witness consciousness, including all the good and all the evil. Does that get it, Dennis?
That helps a lot to explain the different planes. I think I just overlooked those levels before, so thank you.
Well, this is, we all do, Dennis. That's the thing. That's why we keep falling back into what appears to be bondage, because we forget. We have forgotten this is what the story of the Garden of Eden and the fall is all about. We wanted to experience duality. We ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What is that? We ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We wanted to experience duality. Duality came with a great price, forgetting who we truly are. So being, creating, doing, and sharing, the joys of these is why we're here. But it's all dualistic. It's all yes and no, karma's blows, all those things. And that's why it becomes for us a heart attack machine. That's Bob Dylan's phrase. A heart attack machine. It gives us such anguish. Then, if we learn to turn within, we find this witness self. And it is really a revelation. Aha, aha. And more we learn to live in that witness self. But inevitably, as long as we're in our waking state awareness, it's hard to hold on to that. This is what Swami means by a struggle. We struggle to find that witness consciousness and then abide there. Thank you, Dennis. That is right on point. Anything else from anyone about this? I mean, let's get this flat, because we can't build on uncertainty and doubt. If there's any questions, let's get them out. If there's anything to contribute from your own experience of why this, either you do believe this or you don't believe this, then let's have that out also. This is we seem to be a group of individuals. In fact, we are that one being appearing as these many individuals, And every one of us has that great wisdom and knowledge within us. And so we're doing our best to manifest it. So anything you have to say is worthwhile. That's what it means to study the art of spirituality together. Anything
Shankara,
else?
hi, Sumesh
Yes.
here.
Hello, Sumesh. I've been waiting to hear from you.
Thank you. I just want to share what came through my mind when I heard, why should we struggle to attain it?
Yes.
And when you were reading, the question came like, if everybody's going to get it, then why do we struggle? And then I realized that, all my life I've been rejecting religion and God, and and for whatever reasons. And then during COVID, one of my friends, he gifted me Gita, and that's how I started. I started looking at and reading, and because I always, had that what is the purpose of my life?
Yes.
I don't, there has to be something. We're not just born to like die, do nothing. So, and I went to, and in COVID, it was very easy because, all I needed was a Zoom link I went to like Arya Samaj, I went to ISKCON, I went to various places.
Yes.
That's how I got connected here. And,
Wonderful.
Yeah. So I was thinking, that even though COVID, I want COVID to end, but it added, it added a lot to my life in this way that
Many people have found that it has had both positive and negative expressions. Yes.
Yeah. And I think, why attain it is that because we have a desire to attain it. I don't know how it comes, where it comes, but me, even though I was rejecting everything, I still had this desire that was the purpose. So,
That was Sri Ramakrishna says, there's no way to hurry it. The desire for freedom becomes predominant at exactly the right time. And my assumption always is that that's why we're here together on these evenings, because that has become it has become a priority for us to understand what it is we're doing, and if we find it unsatisfactory, how to escape. Christopher Isherwood, the famous novelist of the 20th century, who was a short story writer and novelist, was a dear friend and collaborator of Swami Prabhavananda. Swami Prabhavananda would often invite him to lunch, and the Isherwood would occasionally ask permission to bring one of his English friends who was visiting. A number of them visited him, and when Isherwood thought that one of them might benefit from meeting Prabhavananda, he would ask them to come with him to lunch, and the Swami would say, okay. One time he brought a friend, and of course these lunches typically happened after the Sunday lecture. The Swami had delivered a lecture, and at lunch, the Swami asked the English friend of Isherwood's, well, what did you think? And the man was very honest and sincere. He said, well, Swami, if I'm honest, I'll have to say it sounds to me like escapism. And the Swami just chuckled. And after a moment's reflection, he said, yes, definitely it is escapism. But I cannot for the life of me think why I would not want to escape. So that's what
I love that.
Yeah, I do too. I love that story. So that's what we're doing. How do we escape? How do we escape from this feeling of I'm bound? I'm not free. I'm pushed here and there by this manifestation that I'm part of. Well, in fact, that witness self is never pushed here or there or anywhere. It simply forgot and is now remembering. And when we learn to be with that witness self, to abide in that awareness, then we begin to say, this is just something happening in my presence. It's like watching a movie or a play. I may be an actor in the play at one time, but then I jump out and then I'm watching from the wings, watching from the seats. Then you think, well, wait a minute. That which plays is that which comes and goes. This witness self doesn't seem to change or come or go. It seems always the same. And it is a very comfortable seat from which to observe what's going on. But as was said by Dennis, we forget. Anything else?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Talking about struggles and escapism, I've sort of forgotten the entire quote or sentence, and I don't even know whether it was Swami Prabhavananda or Swami Vivekananda. Something like, he who casts aside fortune, fame, and friends attains to liberation. I don't think I'm saying.
That's from the evening prayer. How great was thy sacrifice. Speaking of, it's Vivekananda writing about Sri Ramakrishna. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. Perfect, whom lust could not taint, nor passion nor gold draw near, O Master of all who renounce, fill our hearts full of love for thee. Thou hast finished with fear and with doubt, standing firm in the vision of God, refuge to all who have cast fame, fortune, and friends away. Without question thou shelterest us, and the world's great sea in its wrath seems shrunk to the puddle that fills a hoofprint in the clay. Now, this was Vivekananda's evangelism on behalf of Sri Ramakrishna, saying, this is who came. He's there for you if you wish. It's not dogma. It's not something you must accept. It's not something you must do. It's just, as always, an invitation. But it is evangelism. There's no two ways about it. But you'll notice that prayer is not put on billboards, is not part of television advertising. You have to come to one of these places, which are the direct result in the West of Vivekananda's activities here. Direct or indirect, but I say it's really quite direct. He intended it to happen. You have to come to one of these places to hear that prayer. So the evangelism is not a public evangelism. It is an evangelism of the people who are attracted here to start with, so that they hear this prayer. And it's part of a larger prayer called Breaker of This World's Chain.
What about those who haven't attained fame or fortune and have no desire to do so?
We have no idea what's happened to us in past lifetimes, dear. We only know that we have arrived at this feeling this bondage and manifesting this desire to escape from it. So when it was that we cast aside fame and fortune, and by the way, it doesn't, when it says cast fame, fortune, and friends away. Doesn't mean you can't have friends. Of course you can have friends. Vivekananda had friends. Sri Ramakrishna had friends. It's that you don't depend on them for your self-image, for your, you understand that friends, and certainly those of us who live long enough will certainly know it's true, their friends begin to pass from the world. So like everything else, as dear as a friendship might be, you cannot depend on it for your happiness. That's what it means, having cast friends away. Cast friends away in the sense of having a gang of people that you're part of, that you depend on for your self-image and for your sense of well-being. Your sense of well-being has to come from within before you can begin to attain to freedom. You have to understand that nothing on the outside, nothing outside of you is going to give you true happiness, and certainly will not give you true freedom.
I think earlier in this book, Swamiji also has said, right? I mean, I'm kind of paraphrasing that Buddha, he had everything to give up and he gave up. And somebody who's just, not wanting to do anything and gives it up, doesn't say when God will say, well, why?
Well, yes, it's those of us who've lived the way we've lived in this lifetime, each of us who's here this evening is fully capable of manifesting wealth, fame. Each of us could have done that. We could have pursued that. Various decisions we made or seemed to make in our lives. I say seemed to make because it really isn't the left mind that is making the decisions. Krishna is very clear about this. But it is the intentions of the Atman that are governing what we get up to. But nevertheless, there's not a human being present this evening who could not have, if they had directed all their attention in that way, become wealthy or famous. Every one of us has that within us. So, in a sense, we came in a package that had already left those aspirations behind. Does that make sense, dear?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Brother Shankara, I would like to add one thing.
Yes, please, Somesh.
Yeah. So I understand, the fame and fortune, if you don't have it, you don't give up. But still, we have a lot of things that drive us, like our senses drive us for. And reminds me a story like Osho Rajneesh had put it, that there was this one guy who was walking and he dropped his umbrella. So if you're walking behind him, you as a good person, you will, like, without thinking so much, you would just pick up the umbrella and give it to him.
Yes.
And suppose the person doesn't even acknowledge, just snatches the umbrella and walk away. And that's when you realize, that even though you didn't think of anything, you may think that, okay, what kind of person is this? Doesn't even say thanks. And there's a lot of desires underneath, which, we don't know, but they drive us to do these things, or the expectations are there. Even if it's
yes.
not.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So right.
Yeah.
These are our samskaras.
Yes.
And as the Swami pointed out earlier in this lecture, and is pointed out several times, but he pointed it out specifically in this, the sum of our samskaras is our character.
Yes, yes. So we don't have to give up the kingdom away, but even those desires are binding us here. So
yes.
It's the same thing, whether fame, fortune, or those desires to be acknowledged, or desire to be just a good person, or like that.
Yes. So to grow, we replace the lower samskaras that are manifesting as the aspects of our character that we feel are no longer auspicious. We replace those samskaras with higher samskaras. But ultimately, we leave all that behind. As Swami Vivekananda pointed out in another context, fetters, though of gold, are not less strong to bind. So we leave, first of all, we leave behind all those manifest aspects of evil and self-centeredness. Then we leave behind the goodness as well, because it is only within manifestation that this goodness and its mirror image, evil, exist. In the realm in which the Atman abides, there is no such thing. So that's why the prayer, Om Asato Ma Satkamaya, that first shloka can be roughly translated this way. Lead us. Well, it's most often translated as lead us from the unreal to the real. What does unreal and real mean? So it can be roughly translated this way. Lead us from this realm of endless noise and relentless confusion to thine abode of silence, serenity, clarity, and peace. Once we've arrived in that abode, we are next door to freedom. And so this is what we're struggling toward.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
So one of the reasons I was kind of mulling over that question is two of my very good friends that we were all together in high school and college, and kind of, neck to neck with our grades and all that.
Uh-huh.
And two of them have become very successful, achieved like very high positions, and I'm very happy for them. But sometimes I feel like, was I not committed enough, that I probably didn't, fell behind in the race, so to speak. Although I'm happy now that this is what draws me now, the spiritual path, and reading the spiritual material list. That's what is, whenever I think I could go back to work, but I'm not drawn to that anymore. I'm more drawn to.
Didn't you become an MD? Didn't you become a certified doctor with all of the things that go along with that? Isn't that what you did, Swayam?
Yes, I did.
All right. Well, how much effort does that take? It's a tremendous amount of effort to become an MD. It's a very small club, indeed. And it's intentionally designed to be a small club. Only a few have the grit and the stick-to-itiveness to become an MD. So, you attained, but then you saw this is not enough. All of that comes with success as an MD, the money, the prestige and all that, it's not enough. There's more. Something is calling me beyond this. This is described very, very well in the first 18 pages of Swami Ranganathananda's book, Divine Grace. It is described very well, that arc that you went through. And you manifested all that. Now these other people, they have a different set of samskaras. They are each unique. And we can never compare ourselves to others. Never, ever, ever. It's just really futile and absurd to compare ourselves to others.
Thank you. That answered my question.
Anything else from anyone? All right, it's 1 minute after 9. We certainly can take time to address anything else that you'd like to contribute or questions or concerns. But I think that'll be it for the reading tonight, which is interesting because we'll start with a quote from the Gita. When we start next week. Anything else from anyone? All right, dears. It's the greatest wish that this really is working for us. And the fact that you come back week after week makes me think that there's something to that. So it is so wonderful to be with you. It is so wonderful to do this together. So I'll close with that prayer that I quoted from a little bit before. Om asato ma satkamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amrutangamaya, abir moiti. O dearly beloved Lord, lead us from this realm of endless noise and relentless confusion to thine abode of silence, serenity, clarity, and peace. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through, light us through and through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Any final thought from anyone?
Shankara, I want to thank you actually for having this every week and for coming, answering our questions, for making it happen. It's because of you that all of us gather here. So really,
So
it
much.
means a lot.
Thank you for those very sweet words. If you knew the joy that it gave me, you'd know why I must thank you. This is, in 1975, I prayed to Swami Vivekananda after I'd read Jnana Yoga and was so excited by it. And finally, I'd read something that made sense and rang true. And I prayed to him, make me a part of this, make me a part of this. And many, many things happened over the decades. And in this final chapter, here we are, being with Swami Vivekananda, just as alive as he can be in these words.
Mm-hmm. So
that prayer was answered. And so thank you, Somesh. But it is, believe me, that this is there is such a mutuality here. But thank you very much for those sweet words.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone?
I just wanted to share that Swami Vivekananda indeed works in strange ways. When I was in school, I don't remember which grade, fifth, sixth, something, we took part in a competition, inter-school, where we had to recite, I think it was part of Swamiji's speech to the World Parliament.
The Parliament of World Religions, yeah.
Yeah, organized probably by the Vivekananda Society or something, I had no idea. And we had to recite parts of the speech in Hindi and English. And I won the first place in both languages. And we got some books as gift, but I just kept the books aside, and there was nobody to guide me into what this is all about. But after all these years, now I'm here. So
it seems like such a long time to us, doesn't it, dear? Because of the perspective of our human form. But in cosmic time, it is not even the beginning of a blink. Between the time that you manifested whatever it was that won you that first place. Something within you knew what you were saying. And that's why you won those first place merits in both languages. We think that it's a long time, this human life. But as Sri Ramakrishna said, a human life is of only 2 days' duration, trying to give us some sense of how brief it really is. And, so we wink in, we wink out, but some of us, and here we are on a Wednesday evening, a little after 9 o'clock on a Wednesday evening, gathered together, studying together the art of spirituality. Now, the words, the art of spirituality, are very profound. The art of spirituality the art indicates that it goes beyond the left mind. It goes to that part of us where art comes from, which is the right mind and the heart. And studying the art of spirituality. It's not something of the left mind. This is why Chaitanya's prayer opens, chant unceasingly the name of the Lord, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean, and quench that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, raging furiously within. Studying the art of spirituality leads us in that direction. Cleaning the mirror of the heart so that what we are reflecting becomes perfectly clear to the witness. And that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, which is as natural to us as breathing itself. Studying the art of spirituality quenches that fire, because we see the futility of trying to find happiness in that direction. And yes, we forget, and then we remember, and then we forget, and then we remember, which is why Vivekananda said, we fall 1,000 times we rise 1,001 times. So we mustn't be upset with ourselves when we forget, and we must take great joy when we remember.
And I must second Somesh that I also feel that I owe my whole journey to you, because the very first lecture I attended and the way you responded to my questions and answers, immediately I was connected. So thank you very much.
Jai Shri Ramakrishna Jai Ma, Jai Swamiji. Jai Shri Ramakrishna Jai Ma, Jai Swamiji. You know, everything is done from that perspective. So, sweet words, very gratefully received. This is where the joy lies. And I'm glad it's true that it's mutual. Anything else from anyone before we close out? All right. The next time we can get together, if you wish, is Saturday at noon, when we're studying Swami Prabhavananda's wonderful, and I do mean wonderful, translation and commentary on translation of and commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. The title of the book is How to Know God. We're still very early on, so if you want to jump in the water with us, the water's fine. And the Swami has such remarkable things to say. Anyone who reads that book, Brahmadas is one of among us who's read that book and celebrates it. It really is quite a remarkable book. And then on Sunday there'll be a talk, and I can't for the life of me remember what the title of it is and what it's about. It'll be on the Bhakti path, because that's what February is about. February the 20th, we'll have a guest speaker. I don't know who yet. Probably Sister Eleanor Francis again. It's because I'm having a surgery, not a serious one, but enough to require at least a week's rest and recovery on February 17th, Thursday the 17th. Aaron, many of you know Aaron from being part of these classes. Aaron Shippey is going to come and live with me for a week or 10 days to help take care of me, which will be very sweet. And so we'll have a guest speaker on the 20th. Any final thought from anyone? Okay, dears. Until Saturday or Sunday or next week, whenever we see you. Jai, 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 Jai the Divine Presence.